I've seen a lot of cases in my time. Most of them blend together after a while. Faces, names, details. Nothing more than another puzzle to solve. But then, there are the ones that stick with you. The ones that gnaw at your soul. This is one of those cases. It started like any other rainy Thursday. The city was cloaked in its usual grey. The streets slick with puddles. I had just finished a cup of cold coffee when the call came in. "Detective, we need you at the old Sinclair estate. There's been a murder." At first, I didn't think much of it. The Sinclair estate was known for its quiet wealth, the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Until now. When I arrived, I was met with an eerie silence. The mansion stood like a dark sentinel against the night, its windows darkened with heavy curtains. Inside, it was even worse. The victim, Emily Sinclair, lay sprawled across the marble floor of the grand hall, her body twisted unnaturally. There was no blood, no signs of struggle. It was as if she'd just dropped dead. But there was something off about it. I crouched next to the body, scanning the room. The only thing that caught my eye was the old grandfather clock in the corner. It wasn't ticking. "You noticed that too, didn't you?" A voice called from behind me. I turned to see Chief Officer Barlow standing in the doorway. He was always one for theatrics. The kind of guy who loved to show up at crime scenes and try to take control. But this time, his usual bravado was gone. "The clock?" I asked. Barlow nodded. "It's been stopped at exactly 3:15. That's when we found her." I stood up, running my fingers along the surface of the clock. No dust, no signs of wear. It was as if it hadn't been touched in years. But the more I thought about it, the stranger it seemed. Why stop the clock? And why at that precise moment? That was the first clue. But there were more to come. I began questioning the family. Emily's brother, Richard Sinclair, was the first suspect. Tall, handsome, a man with a sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. He claimed he was upstairs in his study when his sister died, but I could see the lie in his posture. There was something he wasn't telling me. His wife, Marianne, seemed just as uneasy. A cold woman, she watched me with sharp eyes, like a hawk ready to pounce. She was distant, almost too composed for someone who had just lost a family member. But it wasn't her behavior that caught my attention. It was the photo frame on the mantel. A photo of Emily, with her eyes scratched out. I raised an eyebrow. "Care to explain this, Mrs. Sinclair?" Her lips curled into a tight smile. "I didn't know Emily that well, but perhaps you should ask Richard about it." Something didn't sit right. I wasn't buying her story, but Richard was hiding something much darker. It wasn't until I combed through Emily's personal belongings that the next twist came to light. I found a letter, a strange one. The handwriting was shaky, almost desperate, but the message was clear. "He's planning something terrible. You have to stop him. He'll do it tonight." It was signed simply. A friend. I knew the letter was important. But who could have written it? And why had it been hidden in a drawer in Emily's desk? I confronted Richard again. This time, his facade cracked. "She was going to ruin everything," he confessed, his voice trembling. "She knew about the money, the debts. She was going to expose me." The pieces were starting to fit, but I wasn't convinced. Richard had motive, yes, but it still didn't explain the letter. Or the clock. Then came the breakthrough. I discovered that Emily had been secretly meeting someone in the weeks before her death. Someone who had been watching her. Someone with a personal vendetta against her. I dug deeper and found it was her best friend, Nora. Nora had been in love with Richard. But when Emily found out, the two women had a falling out. Nora had become obsessed. The night Emily died, she confronted Nora at the estate. They had argued, and at some point, things escalated. Nora had locked Emily in the grand hall, where she died suddenly, probably from a dose of poison, slipped into her tea. But it wasn't just the poison that killed her. It was the guilt that ate away at Nora's soul. I returned to the estate, searching the house one last time. That's when I found it, the silver locket Emily had always worn. But this time, it wasn't around her neck. It was on the floor next to the clock, its clasp broken. Inside, I found a tiny photograph of Richard and Nora, smiling together. Before Emily had entered their lives, Nora had planned it all. I confronted her, but she broke down in tears, confessing everything. In her twisted mind, she believed that if Emily was out of the picture, she could have Richard all to herself. As for the clock, it had been stopped by Nora herself. She knew that the moment Emily died, it would mark the end of her story. Sometimes the silence speaks louder than the noise. And sometimes the truth is hidden in the smallest of details. An old clock, a forgotten letter, a broken locket. You just have to know where to look. But let me tell you this. The case isn't over. In the shadows, there's always something waiting to be uncovered. And I'll be here, waiting until next time.